Hello and welcome to Podiatry Practice Mastery. My name is Don Pelto and I have Mr. Robert White here. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Pelto. It's a delight to be with you.
Yeah. So you kind of have a very interesting history. You kind of a speaker, you're an author of Living an Extraordinary Life. You've done things in other countries. Tell me kind of tell me about a little about your background, how you got interested in personal development and entrepreneurship and things like that.
I'm old enough to have way too long a story, and I don't want to take up too much of the podcast with my story. But I think significant turning points were that I found myself at age 27 with a small sales business. I was broke. I was late on paying payroll. I had 3 heart attacks and had daily chest pain. I had a failed marriage and felt very guilty about it. And a friend enrolled me into one of the early human potential movement trainings. And I resisted for a long time, but then I went, and it's a cliche to say, but it changed my life for the better, those 4 days. I woke up to how I was getting in the way of my business success and personal success. And that following year on the business channel, I tripled my income. And the year after that, it went up 10 times. And yet in that training, there was not one word said about success or about money or about making money.
It was all mindset.
It was all about mindset. It was all about me. I mean, it sounds like some kind of an Oprah show or something, I guess, if I do this, is that I did grow up in poverty, and I did grow up in significant abuse. And I made some assumptions about myself as a result of that, and they needed to be put aside in service to what I really wanted to create in my life. And that training experience led to me putting over 400 people into that training, because I found out that when people went to the training, my life got better. It wasn't some noble effort, and I didn't get paid for it. But one day I got a phone call from the founder of that company. It was called Mind Dynamics. And Alexander Everett, a Brit who was an immigrant to America, called me. I didn't even know who he was, introduced himself, said, come out to California and meet me. And 10 days later, I was the president of that company, running the business side of a fairly large training organization. And so that got my start in the training industry and in the human potential movement. I was there 4 years. There were ownership issues there because one of the owners died. I ended up working for a probate judge, no fun. And I launched my first of the 3 companies that I founded and led, with 1,300,000 graduates. So that's my main claim to fame, I guess, is running training companies. And in the last 10 years, actually getting up in front of the room with executive audiences and doing some work on transformational experiences. And I wrote a book about it and all that kind of stuff. But I would say, in introducing myself to your audience, I think there are a lot of trainers, good consultants, good mentors, good executive coaches out there. Probably what's a bit different for me is that I've been there and I've done that. I've run a 240-person professional services firm, active in 7 countries with 15 offices. So I've done it, in addition to working on developing my staff and some of our graduates that I directly touched.
Wow. Let's it seems like you've almost opened up the curtain so we can see more about you, Robert. And I think that's good. Let's kind of go down and see, like, in us, when we are stuck, let's say seeing patients 40 hours a week, many of us hold the hat of owner, founder. Maybe we're not manager. We might have manager. We have staff, kind of staff issues. How can we get out of our own way? If you know what I mean. You were in your own way. And let's say if we, I find a lot of the progress is very slow. Let's say I've been here 15 years, and we have 2 offices now. Like, I don't even know if I want to go to the multiplying route, but maybe, how do you get out of your own way? Why are a lot of us in our own way? If you want to talk a little bit about that.
They're speaking simply about our methodology, Dr. Pelto, is that we do 3 things with our clients today. With my executive clients, my managing partners, owners, people like that. First is to do some work on completing the past. Anybody that's had any level of success, and I'm going to say most of your listeners, you made extra effort for the education, for getting started, for setting up a practice. It's not easy. Not everybody does that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for that. In order to do it, what we do is we compartmentalize things that happen to us that we know would be in the way. So an example would be holding on to blame or shame or regret or guilt, or even past success, because all of those things can have a kind of negative energy to them. We don't let them defeat us directly. We do, in fact, compartmentalize them or stuff them down, to use perhaps a more casual way of talking about it, and get on with our lives.
Yep.
Those things are still there. And if we wonder why some of our attitudes, our habits, even our behaviors don't match what we know needs to be done, if we look under that into the subconscious mind or into our patterns, or however you want to describe it, quite often we find little pieces of garbage from the past that we are subconsciously quite often holding on to. So some work needs to be done on letting go of that. Now, I'm not talking about therapy. I'm talking about the normally neurotic, you and me.
Yeah. I think everyone during this pandemic, I think we all could use someone to talk to an hour a week. You could call that a therapist, a coach, whatever you want. I just think there's a lot of good in getting it out and getting your words out and giving words to what you're feeling. Exactly.
And so that's the first step. The second step is an interesting one. I've spent 23 years of my working life abroad. I've lived in Japan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. And so I'm a little more exposed to the East and Eastern thought and philosophies. And the second thing that I work with executive clients is to learn to better tell the truth about current reality. If you are working hard and if you say to yourself, this is really what I want to do, and yet your intake of alcohol or drugs or other addictions, shopping, whatever,
social media, whatever it might be,
those are signals to you that things are not all right in your world, and you need to take some action, like having a coach, like reading that book that somebody suggested to you, getting more involved with your faith, whatever it takes for you to get really more present. When I was growing up, there was a famous book called Be Here Now by Alan Watts. That book, by the way, if you read it today, it still has value. But getting into the present, what the Buddhists call it is developing a selfless regard for reality. We all, especially independent business people, we all live in a story. We have a story about everything, and it's great. It motivates us. It motivates the people around us. What's also true is you can get so caught up in your story about reality that you start ignoring reality. So that's the second piece of the work that I do with people. And then finally, if you've done those first 2, what you've done is created a space for actually choosing your future. Quite a few of us are doing something in life that we didn't really choose it. It's really an extrapolation of our past, just kind of thrown into the future. And so I work with people on developing a compelling vision, and one that is more result oriented, because ultimately that's the feedback we all need when we make some kind of change. We need somebody coming to us and saying, hey, you're showing up a lot more powerfully than you have in the past, or something's different about you and I really like it. But the one we can control is the results that we are producing. And that comes down to some very practical stuff like numbers of appointments and depth of work and different things. You'd probably be able to give me the right terms for your practice.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, I think it's I think you said something truthful there, that we all get so busy. I think the overlying feeling I get when I talk to other podiatrists is that everyone is they're just humping it. They're so darn busy. And it's unfortunate because you don't have time to deal with these things. And so what it ends up turning to is potentially would be go to whatever leisure they want to do, whatever avoidance they want to do, and an unfulfilled life, and thinking you always want more. The trigger, I was talking to someone recently, and the trigger is, well, when someone says, I feel like I should be doing, like, we have all these shoulds, like I should have social media, I should have Instagram, I should have all these things. Well,
Yeah.
whenever you're shoulding all over the place, is that really what you want? Or the same thing with needing versus wanting. I need to do that. Well, what do you want to do? I think that's much more powerful living that way.
Yeah, I spoke to over 100,000 people during a recent 6 years in Asia, primarily in China, and I found myself quoting two people that I was just laughing at myself, is because I was quoting my ex-wife that put me through the divorce from hell, but she has a great deal of wisdom, and I was also quoting the late Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits book. And of course, I resent him because he sold 25 million copies of that book, and I haven't sold that many of mine. So I understand my own stuff about that. But, Stephen Covey talks about the distinction between the important and the urgent. And what we find in our business life, it seems to me, is we're constantly paying attention to the urgent and ignoring the important. I strongly look, I've been remarkably successful at getting married and remarkably terrible at staying married. So giving advice on marriage is really hypocritical, but here goes. Boy, you better have a date night. You better have some things you do with your spouse and they're in your schedule, and you don't ever break that agreement. Well, it's the same thing for personal growth and for being not in your business, but above your business, looking down on it, looking at what you're really developing here. And I think that happens to have huge impact also on your personal life and on renewal and energy.
Yeah.
But working in your business is a trap. Working on your business, where is it really? Where do you want it to go? What are some leverage points? That even in a complex system, there's always leverage points, things that where one unit of effort brings 10 units of results. And that's how I think that's how you make decisions on whether or not you should spend more time on Instagram or whatever with social media, is to really honestly take some time every week, at least every week, where you sit with a notepad or with a recorder or with whatever works for you in terms of unleashing some creativity. And it might be a walk in the woods, or it might be running or swimming, but that you spend some time with you every week looking at, why am I here? Do I love what I do? And if not, what needs to shift so I do love what I do? And what's going to bring me the life, the family, the financial success, the acclaim, if that's what you're up to. If you want to be the most famous podiatrist in Dubuque, you can do that, but it's a choice. And that choice is only going to come with some clarity of mind. And that means taking the time to do that, as Covey says, to take a look at what's important versus what is urgent. Because boy, that urgent is always going to be there.
Yeah, that's some great points. It reminds me of Gerber about the E-Myth, working kind of on the business versus in it, and other people that have sold more books than we have. And well, let me ask you, in your experience, when you do a talk, let's say you can do a talk or a workshop, like the actual transformative nature of that, I find is limited. I get excited. I go to a workshop, let's say, and I listen. I get so excited. I have like no pages and no pages of ideas. But translating that to actual positive shifts in life is a challenge for me, and I consider myself kind of disciplined. Do you have any good like habits? Like one of them would be journaling once a week, or different types of habits for maintaining change in your life that people can do on their own, and then when they should consider using someone else to help them.
An extremely successful, like wildly successful friend of mine, an entrepreneur, rereads the Bible once a year. You know, he reads it every day, every morning. He does a certain number of push-ups every morning. It goes on and on like that. He's so disciplined. And I think that's one way, if you lean toward that kind of discipline. My experience is most people do not have that kind of commitment. But you know, reading, there's a huge amount of research that says if you read one book a week, you're going to be way ahead in terms of success and happiness ahead of other people. But again, that's a discipline. That's called reading almost every day. My own leaning, speaking of leanings, is toward experiential learning. There's a book that was published here I live in a western suburb of Denver, Colorado. I've got this beautiful view of the mountains out my window here. At least today, we don't have any smoke from California wildfires, which has been our last week. But I think that this book, it's a terrible book. I don't recommend it, but the title is amazing. And the title is, You Don't Learn to Ride a Bicycle from a Book. And you don't learn to ride a bicycle from a video or from a motivational seminar. You get on the bike. And maybe you get your knees, you know, if you think back to those days when you learned to ride a bike, maybe you fell a few times, maybe you scraped your knee, maybe you cried, maybe you had a coach, somebody to kind of help you and get you started, get you moving. But it's an experience. And if you don't ride a bike for 10 years, can you still ride a bike? And the answer, of course, is yes. You might be a little shaky at first, but you get on a bike and there's this muscle memory or whatever you want to call it, and you've had that experience. Dr. Pelto, I have graduates from our program from 20 years ago that still send me a list of goals every year in late December. I've never asked for that. They just do it because they had such a vivid experience. Now, that experience involves taking some personal risks. It involves having some clarity about what you want to create in your life and gaining that clarity in that kind of a high impact seminar experience. So I think for me, the answer is, are you putting yourself into experiences that stretch you, that interrupt you, that cause you to really take a look at your life? Or are you playing safe? And for most of us, including people that have at least a little success, that tendency to play safe at some point in life is a pretty strong tendency.
Yep.
There's a real pull there to avoid anything that's going to interrupt our picture of ourselves, whether you call it self-esteem or self-image. You know, we do so much work to maintain that, and yet it's letting go of that. The great teachers for thousands of years have told us to, you know, see the awful condition that we're sometimes in and do something about it. That's not new to Robert White, you know. So I think finding those experiences, and some of them can come in workshop settings, some of them can come in sport or in travel. Yeah, you know, I remember living in Japan, lived in Tokyo, 3.5 hours away by train is Osaka, the main commercial city of Japan, and kind of the Chicago of Japan. And but they have a great 5-star hotel there called the Royal. And I was sitting in the lobby waiting for my appointment. And it was one of those where there's a settee and then back to back with another settee. And there were five, what I call the blue-haired ladies, you know, the American women that travel together with the blue hair. And so I have to admit, I was eavesdropping and listening to their conversation, and they were very exercised about the fact that they could not get a good hamburger. They're in Osaka, Japan, which is known in Japan for the quality of its cuisine. Again, like Chicago, great food, reasonable prices, widely available, and they were really missing those hamburgers. Yeah, but the point being that travel can be incredible, but not if you're staying at the five-star hotel and with a bunch of people that speak English. You know, I have a lot of faults, including those that my ex-wives will gladly tell you about. But I do have a willingness to risk, to jump into new situations and see what I see and experience what I experience and learn whatever is there for me. And so I think the answer to your question, first of all, great question, but secondly, that the answer is complex because it's going to be different for every person. But I often suggest to people is find out a risk area, find something that caused you to get a little more than a little nervous, but you kind of have that sense like it might be a good thing to do, good to try. Whatever your routine is, break it, you know, do some things differently.
Yeah, I know you recommended Brene Brown, the vulnerability. She talks a lot about that, and it can be anything. I know for a lot of people, let's say starting a YouTube channel and being on YouTube, like you did, or like others do, or doing a blog or anything, even just the way that you talk to your patients, what you offer them, the way you treat. You can even do it within. You don't have to go somewhere to do it. But I think doing something you fear every day, reaching out to someone, reaching out to a contact, all those things can be. They're uncomfortable, but they stretch you. And then once you're stretched, it's hard to go back. Or who was it? Someone talked about being in the arena versus just a spectator. You know, a lot of us, it's good for me I can critique, you know, Robert White all I want. Oh, this and this and this, but he's in the arena doing it. Whereas a lot of us are just like by the side evaluating and not doing anything.
A few years ago, I had an implant done. I lost a tooth and had to replace it. I don't recommend the process, by the way, but I like the result. But when I was sitting in the lobby of this oral surgeon, and I had never been there before, I observed something, which was that a young dentist came out into the lobby because there was an older woman there who was obviously upset. And I'm aware that there are a lot of people that really have a lot of fear around dentistry for whatever reason. They have it. And while I'm sitting there, I watched him, first of all, physically. He didn't stand over her and talk with her. He knelt down in front of her chair, you know, like a penitent, you know, and he took one of her hands in his hands and he started talking with her. And I went, I need that. I need to develop that skill.
That empathy.
The empathy and then the verbal skills. I mean, his word choice was like out of some kind of a textbook, and his caring for her, that empathy thing, was so amazing and so unusual. And I make this point because, you know, this thing, the greatest tool, right? Fabulous tool. I keep, you know, my calendar, my contacts, the weather, you know, an entire world of knowledge is available to me with a touch on the screen. But if you're walking into that doctor or dentist's office and picking up your phone right away, you're missing out on learning most of the time. It's a way we avoid being fully present in our world. And I'm using that as perhaps a kind of crazy example, but boy, there's a lot of learning out there if you wake up. But we get into some fairly fixed attitudes, habits, and behaviors, and those need to be interrupted. So find somebody that'll help you interrupt them. And that
Yeah,
might be a
yeah.
coach. It might be your local minister or priest. It might be a good friend who knows your purpose, your vision, your values, and is willing to confront you when you're off track.
That's great. That's great. Well, Robert, thank you for all these things. I know I'm going to put a little link underneath here about your weekly report that you have if people want to sign up for that, and your book to your link on Amazon. And what's the website where people can learn more about you?
TheRobertWhite.com.
Very good.
TheRobertWhite.com. Yeah, my weekly email has thousands and thousands of readers, and people find it valuable. It's called an Extraordinary Minute because it's designed to be read in 1 minute or less. So a little weekly pick me up, something like that. The book has been a delight, a surprise, even if I avoided it for 20 years, but now it's a bestseller and people like it. They don't like it as much as Stephen Covey's book, but not that I have any energy on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, Robert.
It's my great pleasure. And, to your listeners, reach out. Let's connect. Maybe we're supposed to do something together. Maybe just learn from each other.